Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I can't believe this year is almost over. I feel like 2024 flew by, but I thought in honor of 2025 coming very soon, I would do the 24 best books of 2024. So for a little bit of context, I've always loved to read ever since I was a little girl, but after college I did go through a very long book slump. So in 2024 was the year that I actually got out of my book slump and I started reading again. So that's why you'll see that Book Talks and BookTube's most famous and popular books I actually read this year. I'm so happy I did because they are famous and popular for a reason, and I'm so glad to be back in the book community and to be an active reader again. And I don't know what I was doing with my life before. So I think the best way to go about it is to go in chronological order, in the order that I actually read them this year. So I have my Goodreads list right here of the books I've read so far this year. And yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. So this book was actually one of the first books I read in 2024. And to this day, it's just one of my favorite books ever. It just did something to me. I don't know why I felt it so deeply. And I feel like I've seen a lot of mixed reviews. Like it's either people really love it or people don't really like it as much. And to me, it's a 6 stars. And that's Normal People by Sally Rooney. So Normal People, if you don't know, is about two friends. And you're following these friends all the way from high school to college and a little bit after college. So it's kind of like a coming of age story. So you follow Connell and Marianne all throughout the book. They have a very strong bond and friendship that they develop. It's kind of like an unlikely friendship in high school because they're from like two very different social groups, but they just can't seem to stay away from one another. They just developed this like very strong bond. Just seeing like normal people having like normal thoughts was just so incredibly validating for me for some reason. Also, Sally Rooney's writing, I personally really loved. I know some people don't really like it. This is a 6 stars for me, so I really recommend it to anyone. I think you should try it out, but I will say that it's definitely not for everyone. But as you can see, this book is like annotated front to back. Keep in mind that it is a little heavy. It does touch on heavy subjects, so I would probably read trigger warnings before going into this book. It's just like one of my favorite stories ever. Okay, this next one everyone's gonna know and love because I feel like we all unanimously love this book. And it's A Court of Mist and Fury from the ACOTAR series. So A Court of Mist and Fury is the second book in the ACOTAR series. So in this world, you're following Feyre. This world is divided into like the fairies and the humans. And they have like a war going on. Like they're not really friends. Feyre gets tangled up in the world of the fairies, so you just follow her like journey. And the first book is good. I personally think it's my least favorite of the entire series, just because the series ends up being something so different than what you originally think it's gonna be with the first book. And this is a book where you find out kind of where the story is heading. And the romance in this book, I just don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read the series, but just like the romance in this book. This book boyfriend is my favorite book boyfriend ever. So yeah, I definitely recommend you read the ACOTAR series, and if you read the first one and got unmotivated, believe me, the second one does not disappoint. Following that same train of thought, one of my favorite books from this year, A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is the third book in the ACOTAR series, so it comes right after this one. Obviously, this one takes the cake for me, but this one is my second favorite book in the entire series. I personally love politics, and this book is very politics heavy. So in this book, you kind of dive into a war, and it just has like such high stakes, and I couldn't put it down. I literally read it so fast. And yeah, definitely one of my favorite books of 2024. This won't happen a lot where I have like a bunch of books from the same series. I'm sorry, but A Court of Frost and Starlight is also one of my favorite books from 2024. And this is a very unpopular opinion because this is a novella that's like in between the actual series. And it's very low stakes, but I ate it up. It's literally like a bonus Christmas episode in your favorite TV show. And since the other books are such high stakes, I just wanted to see my favorite characters just chill and have a nice low stake time without fearing that they're gonna die. So I actually love this book so much. I read it so fast because it's super short. It's just like a little small novella, and you kind of get a hint as to what the next book is gonna be about in this one. And yeah, I just really loved this book as well. Okay, we're finally breaking up the fantasy theme we have going on with this one, but my next favorite book of 2024 has to be I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. So this is Jennette McCurdy's memoir, but I loved it so much because it's written in a way where it just like doesn't read like a memoir or like an autobiography. It just reads literally like a fiction story because her story is so crazy. Definitely check out trigger warnings before reading this one. This story is so crazy and I'm literally still in shock. Like after reading this book, I feel like I was in a weird place. Like it was kind of like a weird dark place because like I said, this does touch on very heavy subjects. Basically, Jennette McCurdy just tells us her life story in a very genius way, a very catchy way right from the beginning. I always recommend this book to non-readers if they want to get into reading because it's so catchy right from the start and you just get hooked. And she basically delves into what it's like being a child actor and just everything super toxic going on in like that aspect of her life. But she also touches very heavily on her relationship with her mom, obviously, like the title entails, and it's just such a toxic relationship that she had with her mom, and she had to undergo years and years of therapy and unpacking that trauma to come to a place where she could actually like not only accept that it was a toxic relationship and a very problematic relationship and to stop defending her mom, but also to actually be able to write a book about it. This will go down as one of my favorite books of all time, I feel like. I think at the time I rated it like 4.5, but I haven't stopped thinking about this book since I read it, so I might up the rating to 5 stars. Okay, our next 2 books are from the same series, and it's also a Sarah J Maas series. I'm sure you can already see where I'm going with this. Heir of Fire and Kingdom of Ash. So Heir of Fire is, I believe, the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series without counting the Assassin's Blade. If you count the Assassin's Blade, I think this is the 4th book in the series. And this is a book where Selena gets confronted with a very harsh truth and she just has to, 1, come to terms with it, and 2, actually grow into that truth. I just absolutely love this book because you kind of get a glance at where the story is actually going, because again, just like the ACOTAR series, the first couple of books in this series are so good, but the story ends up being so much bigger than you can ever imagine with those first books, and in this book you kind of get a glance at that. And then Kingdom of Ash is the last book in the series. This book is huge. Like, this book is so long. This book was the longest book I read in 2024. It's 980 pages long. And it's 980 pages that I could not put down. Everything that goes on from the very start of the series up until here, this book is where everything unravels and you see how everything is tied together and you see how well this universe and this world is written. And it just made me respect Sarah J Maas so much for the work that she put into this series, and the fact that she wrote it when she was so young. I feel like she was like under 20 years old when she wrote this series, if I'm not mistaken, and that just like blows my mind. So yeah, those 2 books are my favorite books in the entire series and definitely one of my favorite books of 2024. If I have one bookish regret for 2024, is listening to this book instead of reading it. I listened to this audiobook because I had just switched jobs and my job is like super far away from my house, so I have very long drives, and I was like, oh, that's perfect because I can just like put on audiobooks and just like get ahead on my reading that way. But this book has such beautiful writing that I ended up regretting listening to it, and I had to keep like remembering what quotes I loved. just to later like look for them in the book and highlight them. I just realized I haven't said the name of the book. So it's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I don't know if I butchered that. So Addie makes a terrible mistake in 1714, which is where this story starts off from. So the terrible mistake she makes entails her not being remembered by anyone she meets, and 300 years go by and then she meets someone who can actually remember her and remember her name. It's just a very original story, and the writing is very, very beautiful. I think it's one of my favorite books of 2024 solely because of the writing, because I must say the story isn't really my favorite in the sense that it really didn't touch me all that much, but the writing was just so beautiful and I enjoyed the experience of reading and listening to the book so much that it just stands out to me. Next, and we have our first romance of this video, is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was actually my first Abby Jimenez book, and then later on in the year I actually read her books all in chronological order, which I highly suggest you do. I honestly feel like this would have been a 5 stars for me if I had read it last instead of first, because this is her most recent release. So you follow Justin and Emma. They actually meet through a Reddit post. So they meet online and they realize that they both have this like strange curse going on, where whenever they have a relationship with someone or whenever they date someone, after they break up, that person goes on to meet the love of their lives. And this has happened to them like a few times in the past, so they share this like weird curse together, and they come up with an idea that maybe if they date and then break up, they'll go on to find the loves of their lives. Emma is a travel nurse, and she decides that her next job experience is going to be in Minnesota where Justin lives, so they can kind of start like kind of fake or intentionally date just for this purpose, and the story just goes on from there. But it's so fun, and I love that Abby Jimenez has created this universe where all her books are interconnected, but it's not the most obvious relations where you have this like found family and everything is very obviously connected. This is more kind of like invisible strings, and if you've read all of her books, like you kind of see that connection, and it's just so rewarding when you actually find those connections. Yeah, I gave this book 4.7 stars like I said, but I feel like if I would have read it in order as the last book of hers, it would have been a 5 stars. Moving on, Billy Summers by Stephen King. This was actually my first and only Stephen King book I've read, and I fell in love with his writing. I don't know why I've been like kind of procrastinating and reading more of his books. I just very strongly believe in mood reading, and I'm just like, I guess haven't been in the mood to read more of his books. But this book was so good. It definitely stands out as one of my favorite books from 2024. So in this book, you're following Billy Summers. He is actually a killer for hire, and he is the very best in the business. And he's actually retired, but he decides to come back for this one last job that pays very, very well. Like, it's so much money that he could actually just like never work again in his life. His rule is that he only kills very bad people, and then you kind of just follow him as he gets hired for this job. But this job is like very mysterious. Like, he gets a gut feeling that he's not getting all the information, but it's just so much money that he just decides to do it anyway. It's basically like a mystery and a thriller. Like I said, I fell in love with his writing, and I think I gave this like a 4.25. I would definitely recommend you reading Billy Summers. If you haven't read anything from Stephen King, this is not terror, like it's just a mystery slash thriller, and I think it's a great book to start with Stephen King if you're interested. Okay, once again, these two next books I'll be talking about are from the same series, and it's the Chestnut Spring series by Elsie Silver, and my two favorite books were Flawless, the first one, and Heartless, the second one. If you don't know about the Chestnut Spring series, they're kind of like cowboy romances, but not in like a cringy, icky way. It's mainly just like small town vibes, and what I love about this series is that it's an interconnected standalone series, so these are all very heavily interconnected. And I just think Elsie Silver has cracked the formula for a romance book. Like, she uses the same exact formula in all of her books and I eat it up every single time. These are very, very spicy, so also keep that in mind. In the first book, you follow Rhett and Summer. Basically, Summer is sent to kinda babysit him. He's a very famous bull rider and his PR agent slash lawyer is Summer's dad, and so Summer gets sent to kind of babysit him and like help him with this public image. So you're following just them two in this book, and then in this book you're following Willa, who is Summer's best friend, and Cade, who is Red's brother. And this one you have a single dad trope and kind of like a grumpy versus sunshine trope too. I just love her books so much. They just take me out of my head and make me forget that I'm reading, and I really, really like that. If you have been following my channel and you were around back in the summer, you'll know that I was so obsessed with the series, and I still am, honestly, and it's the Powerless series. So this is Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and in this world, you have ordinaries and you have elites. Elites have powers and ordinaries don't. And basically, the king has brainwashed everyone into thinking that in order for elites to be like very strong and keep on living, they have to kill all ordinaries. And in this series you follow Peyton and Kai. Kai is the son of the king and he is also his enforcer, which means his job is literally to hunt ordinaries, and Pei is an ordinary. And just like the tension in this book, the romance, the plot, this book is very plot heavy, so there's a lot going on besides the romance, and their moments together are so scarce that the tension builds up a lot, and I just really ate up this book. And then the second one in the series is Reckless, and in this book you actually get a lot more time of Pei and Kai together. And since I read Reckless right after reading Powerless, because Reckless had already come out when I read Powerless, I was craving time of Kai and Pei together so much that I absolutely ate this book up. I'm just obsessed with this world, and I can't wait for the third book to come out so I can be in this world again because I love it so much. Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid is another 6 stars for me. So in Daisy Jones and the Six, you follow Daisy Jones, who is a singer. She is very beautiful, very loved in the public eye. The Six is a band, and they kind of get thrown together to collab, and you just like follow them as they navigate that situation. But my favorite part of this book is that it's written in an interview format, so you kind of feel like you're watching a reality TV show. The writing is just chef's kiss. Like, Taylor Jenkins Reid is such a good author. This is also one book that I really recommend to non-readers. It's just so easy to get into and so easy to read. You just feel like you're watching a reality TV show, like I said. And it's also cool because you get to see the different characters' perspective on the same situation, and you as a reader kind of have to decide who to believe. So yeah, I definitely recommend Daisy Jones and the Six if you haven't read it. Our next book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book is also a 6 stars for me. I fell in love with this book. I actually have a book club, and Daisy Jones and the Six and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow are the only 2 books that we've all given 5 stars to unanimously. So in this book you follow Sam and Sadie through their entire lives. They became friends ever since they were little, and then they reconnect when they're in college, and they both share a passion for programming and video games, and you just follow them as they strengthen their friendship but also create a brilliant game together. And it's just such a beautiful story of friendship. The writing is just immaculate in my opinion. It's so good. I know it doesn't sound as appealing if you're not into video games to just read about someone programming video games, but it's just so much more than that. It delves into such important parts of being human and friendship and love. It made me cry at the end. I love it so much. Now this next one also made me cry. It's Loud by Drew Afualo. If you don't know, Drew Afualo is a TikToker, and she is known to stand up for women's rights, minorities' rights, and basically to stand against the patriarchy. She wrote this book about her own experience as a woman and how she had to unpack so many things to finally be at peace with who she was and to finally be at peace with dying alone, as she says, so that you don't have to settle for a mediocre man. I thought the writing was actually pretty good, which didn't surprise me because she's just so smart. I also struggle with the patriarchy and with being a woman in a man's world. I sometimes struggle to put it into words and to understand it myself, but she just puts it into words so perfectly. And I sobbed at the end of this book. Like, it made me feel so incredibly validated. So if you're interested in subjects like that and in unpacking some things and maybe being called out so that you can be your most authentic self and stray away from the male gaze, I would definitely recommend Loud by Drew Afualo. Fourth Wing and Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I think Fourth Wing will go down as one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. In Fourth Wing, if you don't know, you follow Violet in this world. There are like many career paths you can take. Kids and teenagers train for this specific career path from a very early age. The career paths can range from like very high stakes, like being a dragon rider, to like very low stakes, such as being a scribe. Violet has trained her entire life to be a scribe, and she just gets thrown into the rider's quadrant, the very basic training you have to survive to be a dragon rider. Obviously, she is anything but prepared for the challenge, so you just follow her as she like tries not to die, basically. And obviously we have a romance subplot. The romance in this book is just so good. And I obviously had to include the second book in the series, Iron Flame. Iron Flame, I think, could have been a lot shorter than it is. I thought the first 50% of the book got a little repetitive, but then the other 50% kind of made the book redeem itself with me because it was just such high stakes and the plot evolved so much in that 50% of the book that I ended up giving this book like 4 stars, I think, or 4.25 stars. But if you haven't read Fourth Wing, I highly encourage you to do so. It's just so good. And the third book actually comes out next year in January, and I couldn't be more excited. Yours Truly and Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And these two books are actually, this is the first book, this is the second book, and the third book is actually Just for the Summer, which was the first book I read of hers. She has a series before this series that I have also read. Like I said, I read this one first, which is her most recent release. And then I went and read her books in chronological order. So the first series, I didn't include any of those books in this video. Even though I really liked them, I just thought her second series was better. But I really encourage you to read them all just so you can appreciate the world and the universe that she has built. In Part of Your World, you follow Alexis and Daniel, and they both had really different upbringing. Alexis is going through a very ugly divorce, and she has found herself in a place in life where she has prioritized other people's dreams and expectations for her than her own happiness. She is a doctor, and she comes from a very prestigious name in the medical world, so she has a lot of pressure on her shoulders and just a lot of expectations to fulfill. And Daniel is from a small town, and they meet in very unlikely circumstances, but you just watch them navigate like those differences, and you watch mainly Alexis navigate her feelings for Daniel and how she has to like come to terms with prioritizing her own happiness. And then in Yours Truly, you follow Brianna, who is also a doctor, and you follow Jacob, who is also a doctor. Jacob struggles a lot with anxiety, which I could relate so much to. And Brianna is coming out of a very ugly divorce, and Jacob is coming out of a very weird breakup. This also involves a fake dating trope, which is always super fun. And just the way Brianna handles Jacob's anxiety is so cute. I really loved Yours Truly. So if you haven't read Abby Jimenez, I definitely encourage you to do so, because as you can see, I put all 3 of this series books in this video. Okay, so I think we're down to our 2 last books. So I actually read The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery by Gabrielle Zevin very early on in the year. I just forgot to mention it in the first part of this video, so I'll just mention it now. In this book, you follow A.J. Vickery. He has gone through so much and is now in a place in his life where he is kind of grumpy and not happy at all. But he owns a bookstore, so the setting is like super cozy. This book feels like a warm hug in my opinion, and it's always fun to read about book lovers. So anyways, you follow A.J. Vickery as his life is literally turned upside down because he has something happen to him that just completely changes the trajectory of what he expected his life to be. And it's just very like small town, cozy, winter vibes, bookstore vibes. It's just super cute, so I definitely recommend it. Gabrielle Zevin is the same author as Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. So Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow ended up being a 6 stars for me. Like I said, this is more like a 4.5 stars for me, but I think it definitely went down as one of my favorite books of the year, and you should definitely check it out if you want something like very short and sweet, very light. It also has a movie, so that's always super fun. And for our final book of this video, we have Heartstopper. So Heartstopper, if you don't know, is a graphic novel. This book series actually has a Netflix show, which is always super fun to like read the book and then binge watch the show. In this book, you follow Charlie and Nick. Charlie is openly gay. Nick still hasn't figured out his sexuality yet, but you just kind of follow them as they figure out this dynamic of becoming really good friends and then kind of feeling a little more. I also love that this is a queer story. I just love representation, and it just makes me so happy for like young kids to have this type of representation in such an iconic graphic novel and now Netflix show. They're just so easy to read because they're graphic novels. I feel like I read this in like 30 minutes. For the next couple of books, I feel like I'm gonna pace myself a little more just so I don't like fly through them like I did with this one. But they're just so cute and easy to read and just light and fun. These books are like great as palette cleansers between like heavier books. That's how I read this one, and that's how I plan on reading the next books. Wow, that was a lot. Those were my 24 favorite books of 2024. I hope this video motivates you to read at least one of these books. If you do, or if you have, please let me know in the comments what you thought about them and if they made it to your favorite books of 2024. So yeah, that's it for this video, and I really hope you liked it, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!